So I'm really excited to join in the audience with you to watch the Equity in Action panel. And it's just a great pleasure to have a new Chief Diversity Officer and ombudsperson in their role so that they may moderate such a great panel with such great people. And so again, I hope you all get to know OKenZoe a little bit better during this moderation and all of our equity leaders across the campus. And I just want to thank Dr. OKenZoe for taking on this task. I think you've been here for only a minute, but I just love what OKenZoe brings to the table. And I am just absolutely thrilled that he is here with the district team. And I want you to welcome him for this panel discussion.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I am so excited to finally be out of the Zoom box and in person. All right, so our seminar panel today is called Equity in Action. The reason I'm really excited is because now I get to talk about equity in action, which is where our word and our deed are aligned so that the truth of who we are is able to be observed, witnessed, and revealed, that we get back to being the best of who we are as an entire district, serving students and caring for each other. So without further ado, I am going to bring out the panelists who will introduce themselves for our Equity in Action conversation. So if I could, will the panelists please join me on the stage? All right. So as we begin our conversation, we're going to start with first the introduction of each of the panelist members. I'm going to start by asking our student trustee to first introduce himself, or I should say reintroduce himself, if you will, and then we'll move further down the line towards me. So as we have all of our equity personnel and perspectives here, the question of the moment is provide one word that characterizes what you believe at either the district level or the college level, either is your choice. What's the state of equity in our district or at your college? And I'll start with however it is that you want it.
So I think we're doing adequately.
That's fair. And one of the things that I've been talking about lately among cabinet members, primarily because I've not necessarily been formally introduced in many instances aside from this experience, is the connection of leadership accountability to equity. You know, that when we witness a thing, are we actually in our positions just having backdoor private conversations about it, or are we actually disrupting the social ill or occurrence of a thing and holding people accountable, and not in a punitive way, but in a way that really upholds the type of culture and climate of scholarly civility that we expect of not only our students, but really ourselves. And so what is the onus that we have to witness a thing or know that a thing is happening and to not run interference to that, to support people who have been hurt or harmed or are having problems that are just undue. And so I'm really glad to hear that among us are people who are also thinking in this vein.
You know, I hope I wasn't understood as we're not doing anything. I think we're doing lots of things. But my question to us and ourselves is it systemic or is it a bunch of different programmatic things? Because, and you know, in culture of humility, we talk about persistent gaps. And also we talk about cognitive scripts that we individually have, but there's also institutional scripts. And if we keep having, because most of the 3 colleges have very low Black student populations, but yet that's still the highest equity gap. Those are institutional scripts that we're doing. And so that's where the self-interrogation comes from. And in order to do systems change, there's a model that I have followed that I would love the district to follow, is collective impact. And there are principles to collective impact. Shared vision. Do we have a shared vision as a district? Because that's fine that you're doing all that stuff. I'm doing a bunch of stuff too, but is it really changing anything? You know, shared vision, data informed. Because that's where the inequities show up, in the data. So are we using data to close those gaps? Communication. You know, you didn't come talk to me when you started here, and I'm your colleague at the other college. Communication, reinforcing activities. If I'm doing something and it could be systemically impactful, all 3 of us should be doing it because it's reinforcing the activities that you're doing. So I really believe in collective impact. That's how you do systems change, because equity is systems change. It's not programmatic, it's not events, it's not all that's very nice, but it's not systems change, which is where inequities were born, in policies and systems.
So I think the beauty of what we have here, especially in having this conversation, is that you start to really understand the context of how each college campus in its own uniqueness is grappling with, one, various types of interpretations of data, right? Although there are certainly consistencies related to certain populations like African-American or otherwise racially Black students, the data is very consistent across the board and produces an opportunity for us to be able to engage through collective impact. Certainly agreed. I think that the ultimate responsibility of a position like the CDO, albeit I'm in an interim role, I think the greatest responsibility is to develop an office that does actually speak to the level of support that the district can offer, not only the equity officers, but all people, namely through the ombuds function, but also through the CDO role, all people who are trying to figure out pathways for disrupting the systemic structures that actually exist that continue to just be impediments to not only students, but to how we even show up. Like, you know, to impose oppressive dynamic to someone means that you've got to also be connected to that thing that is also oppressive. And so when we talk about this idea of trying to equitize an experience, I often try to simplify it by simply saying, my expectation is to always guide people into tapping into the greatest state of their human compassion. Because if you tap into the greatest state of your human compassion, you are bound to find ways of humanizing and recognizing the uniqueness by which people exist and have needs. And as those needs are addressed, we start to find our path for then disrupting the system and being able to create a common language and understanding that we can then devise into strategy and tactics for execution. That's who they are. Absolutely. As we develop students, we're also developing the future professionals in various positions in the workplace. And so the ability to get them to understand the value of these things very intrinsically then is part of how we disrupt the system, because, you know, short of a tattoo on my neck and cornrows in my head, someone like me would not have held a position like this at all in the past. And so, you know, we have to always be mindful that in as much as we're here in the present, we're also preparing for the future at the same time.
And I think-
So-
oh,
Go ahead. Let's
I'm
make
just
time for
gonna
it.
Tell a story, because I am a little bit of a storyteller too.
Okay.
But the challenge that we have as well with these systems, I was doing a session one weekend with a community, and the principal at a K-5 school, transgender, he said, you know, it seems like every time we take 2 steps forward in, right to marry, these various things, then it's 2 steps back. And I said, that's the system trying to re-establish itself back to homeostasis. And that comes in all kinds of forms, where the system's going to want to go back the way it's been for decades. And that's why we have to continually question. When I talk to people about an equity lens, that's questioning. Is my decision, is this plan, is this project, is this going to adversely impact disrepresented folks, or is it going to improve things? We have to constantly be mindful and question these things, because the system will try to go back,
Exactly.
And
so that actually is the development of how you get to, for those who maybe are on Zoom or in the audience, sort of wondering what's the connection between the self-interrogation, asking the question, and equity mindset. You get to an equity mindset by asking those interrogating questions of yourself and of others, and constantly figuring out the consistency of answer that you produce, right? So that thought should affect then what's said, and what's said should drive or at least be consistent with what you do, and that's decision making and how you show up. I'll ask the audience to consider one word that you believe characterizes the future of equity in the district. And we want a word cloud, because I think it will be great for us to also see what the community via Zoom and in person believe the future of equity looks like, as a way that we start to understand, the existence of what we are all calling, defining, trying to understand as equity, and traversing an equity experience. Go for it.
my word that I sent to you was unknown. To be in the work of anti-racism and equity, you have to be consistent and consistently committed. We have so much transition happening. I've never experienced anything like this before in my life, in my career. So we've got to settle down a little bit and stay in your position a while, so we can do the work. Because if you have to reset every time something changes with folks, that's also that systemic white supremacy stuff playing out too. The resetting puts us back. So I don't know what the future is. That's why I said unknown.
I appreciate your candor, because in many respects, when a person is carrying a formal equity title, you often see sort of this revolving door of people coming and going. And that is, in fact, a truth oriented. In fact, that is about the systemic function doing what it usually does to disrupt the consistency of how we really create progress.
Baloney, have a conversation about land acknowledgements, to no surprise to anybody. They're not big fans of land acknowledgements, mainly because they're always getting requests. And the request is, can someone come by to my spot, give a land acknowledgement? And then usually what happens is people forget about really what the purpose of the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. You talk about land acknowledgement, and it always makes me think land acknowledgement is a way to really talk about people acknowledgement, and people acknowledgement connects to cultural acknowledgement, and the cultural acknowledgement is really about how we raise up the consideration that outside of our own respective types of experiences, there's the collective that has to not only be acknowledged, but honored. And so how we honor that, not only in performance of, audience and things of that nature, but through the sincerity of relationship and being able to really see personhood, even collectively, is really important.
Educational master plan, where our number one goal is around anti-racism, and that has to be implemented. Otherwise, it is just theory sitting on a shelf. So, I guess I feel like I'm Debbie Downer up here, but, you know, someone wrote unstable, and I think that's what, you know, the time to do the practice.
There you go.
We have to do it, you know, and if I'm on a bunch of committees, going to a bunch of meetings, when do I have time to do that? And the Intercultural Center, having events in there, intercultural events. So, you know, we've got a bunch of plans. We've got an enrollment management plan that has to be integrated and implemented. So, like I said, I'm not saying we're not doing a lot, but are we getting the outcomes we say we want?
You know, I don't think that that's Debbie Downer. I think that that's the sobering perspective of someone with the experience and insight to make sure that we continue calling the thing a thing. And while I think each of us takes a very unique approach to how we engage equity, the beauty of it is unto itself the diversity, right? Of being able to take a very unique approach. And so I would caution people who might try to interpret what you're saying as being a Debbie Downer or negative, because the ability to stay focused on the thing that has to get done, the task at hand, is also a part of the entire spectrum of how we have to engage this work. And so your voice and your presence in that unique way that you provide it and bring it, I think is important. And so in this real-time space, I stand with you with what you are representing and what you're saying. So thank you. There's nothing wrong with using the data to identify where the opportunities for improvement are. I think all of that is connected to the hope, right? It's the hope of calling a thing in, not out, that brings people closer together to allow us to have the critical conversations that often are so necessary for us to even figure out where are we really beyond performance, beyond the scripts, where are we really? The ability to be able to have those conversations is the ability for us to really tap into a very serious understanding of what our future looks like and being able to navigate to those goals. Sometimes we take a few steps back. Sometimes we take many steps forward. That's part of human behavior and natural evolution. But the ability to stay hopeful and stay committed to the work that we're doing, that we maintain ourselves as the best possible operating district we can, that focuses on serving the best and greatest dynamic of diverse students possible to create long-lasting impact, I think is really the ultimate win for us. You really just couldn't expect anything more than the continuation of doing the work. So I believe we're at time. I want to be able to thank each of our panelists. So if we could, can we give the panel a round of applause? I want to thank the people who have tuned in on Zoom to be able to be a part of the conversation. And I want to thank you all for showing up and staying for a part of our conversation. There is a deeper dive equity conversation that is going to be held by the Anti-Racism Council later on this afternoon. Please check in with the likes of Dave McClain and Diva Ward for where the location is to be able to participate in that conversation. And thank you for your contributions to what I'm going to focus on as hopeful, promising action. So thank you again.
Okay, before everybody goes, I want to bring up my cabinet team and Karina and Candace and Jan and
And if you're still here as board members, I want you to come up because these are the people that are working to run this district. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful time for the district. And I just want to thank you all for being here and supporting all of the work that we're doing. So thank you so much. And now for the moment you've been waiting for. Lunch is being served in Building 10 at the College Center on CSM.
My favorite moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful panel. Beautiful, beautiful.